Right. So, first I'll do my introductions. Hi, my name is Norm Ellis. This is the Adult One Bible Study at Grace Baptist Church. Glad to have you online and in class here. And we're going to be in John chapter 21. So turn in your Bibles to John chapter 21. If you have a study book, we are on page 118. It's session number 13. It's the last session. So, that being said, here's my prop for the day. Don't let me forget.
Okay.
Hand those out. I have a stack for the next week's unit. We're going to be actually in the Old Testament. We're going to be going to. I think it's Jeremiah. I'm looking at the wrong one. I'm looking at the wrong one. There it is. Jeremiah and Lamentations. This is one of my leftover ones. So hopefully I won't forget. I'll stumble over them. Anyway, so glad to have you all here today. We're going to begin with a word of prayer. That's a good way to begin, right?
Yes.
So let's do that. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for all you do for us, Lord. How you love us, how you care for us. And Lord, just pray you'd be with us as a group as we study your word today. It's precious to us, Lord, to understand these words, these concepts, Lord. I also pray for those that are not here right now, that are on their way here. Keep them safe as they're traveling. For those online, and for those who cannot be here because they're sick and stuff, I'm reminded of Cece right now and Pat while they're in Idaho. Lord, I just pray that you'd help them both to get better. We miss them and hope they can make it back soon. And just pray for our church service upcoming after this hour for Pastor Matthew and the worship team. In your son's precious name, amen. Amen. All right, glad to have you with us. Again, my name's Norm Ellis, in case you didn't know, online. And we're going to be talking about Peter again. Peter and Peter's experience with the Lord. And this is the last part of our study in John chapter 21. So if you have your Bible and you're wondering where we're going to start, that's where we're going to be. And the title is, Do You Love Me? And we're looking at these 3 points right here. Do you? And this is 15 through 17. Will you? 18 through 19. And what about? ... We'll see what he's talking about there. 20 through 23. And we're going to be talking about this main area, that believers, that's Christians, are offered God's grace even when they fail. Even when we fail, God's grace is available for us. Isn't that great to know that? I'm reminded of a verse, and I was going to look it up, and I didn't, but while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. In other words, he was looking forward to the time we would become a Christian. And that sacrifice was done for us that many, many years ago, right? But even though we were still sinners, he still died for us. Think about that. Sacrificially gave himself up for us so we could become Christians as well. Good to see you. Come on in.
Thanks. Sorry. I got stuck upstairs.
This is Tina. And we are, like I said before, we're in chapter 21. If you're following along. And you have your lesson book, so you know where we're at probably. So I wrote on the marker board here a quotation. Do you love me? Do you love me? Sounds like something on Shakespeare or something. I don't know. But anyway, circle one or the other. Yes or no, or whatever it is. A choice. When you were a kid, go back. For me, it's way back. Did you ever get a note like that at school, perhaps? From an admirer, let's say, or something like that. Sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes during Valentine's Day, you'll get these little Valentines that say things like that. Who knows? But as we get older, sometimes we say those things, right? We say those things to someone. We expect maybe an affirmative answer if we're going to be out there, right? Isn't it kind of a hard thing to do, especially when you're older, to express that kind of a thing? Yeah, it's a very hard thing. Yeah, very tough, isn't it? And so when you're a kid, it's not as tough. When you get older, it can be, right? So in our lesson book, it talks a little bit in the intro on it, so I'm going to read this real quick. See, where was I in there? Asking someone if they love us can be a dangerous question. Yes, it can, right? We may hear the right answer while their body language maybe communicates something different. They may view love differently, maybe, than we do, or to a different degree than we had hoped for. Maybe they just meant, I'm fond of you instead of I deeply love you, for instance, right? Even though this may be a dangerous question, it is an important question, so we can know the potential for that relationship. Jesus asked Peter this question. He asked him this question to help Peter reflect on his future. And we're going to be looking at this important aspect here of what Peter encountered with the Lord on one of these post-resurrection experiences. Jesus had been crucified. They saw him. They knew he was dead. Now he's alive. They can't believe their eyes. Jesus is alive, and he's meeting with them, and they're actually able to touch him. He sees him eating food, so he's proving he's not a spirit. He's really there. He's really alive. And so this has been something that's earth-shattering to them. And they couldn't believe it. Thomas would not believe it. Remember Thomas? We talked about him last week. Thomas said, unless I put my hand in his side or touch the nail prints, I'm not going to believe it, because I think you're full of it. I didn't say those words. But, essentially that was it. He could not believe. He was a pragmatic person. He had to see to believe. He was from Missouri. Right? He was that kind of a person. And we all can be that way too. But that was last week. So they've gone beyond that now, right? But one of the things that Jesus had told the women at the tomb was, tell my disciples. Tell them to do something. Remember what he told them to do? Go to Galilee. Right. There's a reason for that. This is that appointment in Galilee. You can subtitle this "Appointment in Galilee," right? That could be part of it as well. Anyway, talking about love can be tricky, as we mentioned, unless you're certain of the answers you're going to get. A little side note: when a prosecutor is going after somebody in a court of law, before they bring charges, they get all their ducks in a row. They know what the answer is going to be. If they're smart prosecutors. We're kind of that way too when it comes to the subject of love, right? I'm going to ask that person or not. Well, I think they do. I'm going to feel it out first to make sure, because I don't want to get hung out there, right? So it's the same kind of thing, if we're certain about it. On the night of his arrest, Peter did something 3 times. What did Peter do 3 times on the night of Jesus' arrest?
Denied him.
He denied him. Somebody said, aren't you one of his followers? He says, no, I'm not, right? Another person said, yeah, you kind of talk like they do. You've got to be one of them. I am not. He's a sailor, so emphatic. I think a little girl asked him, even says, didn't I see you with them one time? And he with an oath, he said, no. And then the cock crowed. And in one of the accounts, you can see right through these porticos, and where Jesus was, Jesus could look out over the porch area where Peter and other people were, warming themselves by the charcoal fire. And it says that Peter saw the Lord looking at him when that cock crowed. And he did something. What did he do?
He cried.
He cried. He left. He grieved. He was heartbroken because the Lord had told him, you're going to deny me 3 times for the cock crows. And he says, I won't do it. I'll go to the death. I've got a sword. I'm going to protect you, Lord. That'll never happen. And he did it. He did it. He betrayed his Lord. So keep that in mind. This is what's happened to Peter, right? He denied him not just once, not just twice, but 3 times. That experience devastated Peter. And he went out from that area grieving. And by the grieving, we're not talking about just sad. Not just a sad face. He was heartbroken.
That's not this book.
He could not.
That's next time.
Which one's that? You don't have this week's? Yeah, I'm sorry.
I looked. I think we're.
There was one extra there.
Here, you can have mine.
Oh no! Oh, I gave him out. I'm sorry.
No, here. You can have mine. I'll share it.
You sure? You don't mind?
Oh, absolutely.
It's my last of the old books. I've been giving them out slowly. They're almost gone now, and that's great. I like to get the books out to people. Where was I? Okay, so he denied him those 3 times. And if you've been following along, we're on our last point here. You can't read it because I'm in front of it. The continuing work of the Son of God, chapter 21. We're in that part of our outline. And let's see, what else? Was there something else? Oh, yeah. If you have a copy of our notes, which I'm sure most of you in here do, those of you online may not have got a copy of them. But if you contact us, we'll be sure to put you on a mailing list or email list, and you can get a copy of them every week. But anyway, handout number 2 talks about the outline of John's Gospel, and that's what I was just pointing to. And we're also going to be looking, give you some additional information here for yourselves to see. Handout number 3, and we're under the 3rd column where it says John, and we're actually on the last spot now this is the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus. And this is the 7 disciples by the Sea of Galilee. There's only 7 of them here at the time. I don't know if there's a reason for that or not necessarily. Not all of them were able to make it, apparently. But there were the 7 that were there. And that's where we're at this particular juncture. But they were told by the women that Jesus would meet them in Galilee. Now, was Galilee a familiar place for these disciples?
Yes.
Yeah, it was. That's their home stomping grounds. Most of them, not all of them, heralded from the Galilean region. Several of them were fishermen. And if you remember when Jesus called them, he went down to the Sea of Galilee and he talked to some of these fishermen, right? And actually he got, I think, in Peter's boat and shoved out a little bit and spoke to the people around. But he was very familiar with the Galilee region. The Galilee region was in the north, away from the area of Jerusalem. But he had a lot of friends in that area as well, because a lot of the disciples did come from that area. Oh yeah, I know what I was going to do. I got sidetracked, didn't I? There's a section called Understanding Context, and I just want to read part of it, the first 2 paragraphs. It says, and this is on page 119. If you follow along, you don't need to. I'm going to read it. It says, following their encounters with the risen Jesus in Jerusalem, the disciples traveled northward to the Sea of Tiberias, also called the Sea of Galilee. Shortly after his resurrection, remember, Jesus had sent a message with the women who saw him. He wanted the disciples to go on to Galilee, where he would join them. If you look in Matthew 28:10, you'll see that. So as they waited for Jesus, several of them decided to join Peter. And Peter says, I'm going fishing, essentially. Now, what was Peter? A fisherman. So was he familiar with this? Yes. It was his life's profession before he met the Lord. Remember that? The Lord met him when he was fishing on Peter's boat. Okay? So, you got to think Peter liked to do what? Fish. That was his occupation. A lot of us have occupations. Hopefully, the old saying goes, you like what you do. Because if you like what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Ever heard that term before? That phrase? So it was something like I like to take pictures. I know Steve does too. If I could get a job as a photographer, I wouldn't feel like I was working. Because it'd be a blast, right? I'd do that and make money too. Wow, what a deal. Well, in a sense, that's kind of what Peter was. Peter loved to fish. It was what he wanted to do. So keep that in mind also as we go through these verses. So Peter said, basically, I'm going to go fishing, right? So several of them joined Peter. It says, one wonders if Peter wanted to return maybe to his former occupation as a commercial fisherman. Peter was tired emotionally, physically, spiritually. His flight to the familiar was a natural reaction to the stress that he had been experiencing. So when we undergo, and that's all I'm going to read from that part there. When we undergo stress in our own life, what do we do to calm ourselves down?
Get involved in whatever our hobby is.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to pray.
Well, you're supposed to.
Yeah,
You're right.
that's true.
But a lot of times we do, they'll go to what's familiar, right?
Yeah.
What we want. Maybe it's a special place you go to pray, right? Maybe it's a garden place, like Jesus went to.
Gethsemane.
He went to Gethsemane, to the Mount of Olives to pray
Mount of
many
Olives,
times,
yes.
right? That was his pattern. He enjoyed being there because he liked the solitude, he liked the quietness of the place, maybe the birds, I don't know. But that was where he went to pray, right? So there's many times there's places like that in our life that we like to do. I like to go fishing myself personally. I'm happiest if I'm out by myself with my fishing pole and just enjoying what I'm doing and not being bothered sometimes, because sometimes things get to you. You know, they just do. And you got to decompress from
I
life.
like to garden.
Garden.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really relaxing thing, isn't it?
I'm growing grapes and berries, and sometimes
right.
I'll just sit there and look
Yeah.
at the flowers and
Yeah.
see how much they grew today.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I do the same.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every day. I look at
By the way, I
That's what I
have.
do.
Would you like to read it?
It's relaxing.
I have some verses that at various times I'm going to ask to be read. They're real simple ones. Who wants a verse? Anybody want to read a verse? You got one? There you go. There's an easy one for you. By the way, you can also read it in your own translation. You're not. You want that one? You going for the big one? Anybody else want one? You want it?
Oh, here?
Who else
Give
wants
one to her. Oh.
it? You want one? Wait a minute. You volunteering people? Oh
Yes,
boy.
that's what I do.
Wait a minute. What am I even sitting here in charge for? I'm not. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Anyway, so to understand the concept of why was Peter in Galilee? They were told to go there.
Yeah.
Right. He was told to go there, right? And maybe Why did he go fishing?
He's one of those guys, I fish, therefore I am.
Yeah. But it was something familiar. It was the
Yeah.
familiar. Things had been turned upside down for him in his life. He was going back to something that was familiar. I can do that right now. You know, I can
Well,
go
if you're
fishing.
going to Galilee, you got to do something. You're
That's
not
right.
gonna just
That's
hang
right.
around.
What is interesting is one of the verses, and I meant to look this up as well. I'm a bad teacher, I didn't look this one up. Because I think one of the disciples, it might have been Peter, it might have been James or John, they were also fishermen. But they made this claim, we've left all to follow you. Well, Peter apparently still had a boat. That's all I'm going to say. Sometimes in life we say, oh yes, I'm going to be all in for you, Lord, but we got this little thing going off to the side that if it doesn't work out, I'm going to fall back to that.
Yeah.
It's almost like that for Peter. I'm not casting dispersions on him necessarily, but there could be that element as well, and we're going to kind of talk about that as well.
Well,
too.
Peter was almost kind of like family because he went to Peter's house and
Yes,
his
he
mother
did.
served him.
Yes.
So it was very familiar.
There was a very familiar thing, wasn't it? Yeah. Now, if I can find my text. Oh, there we go. So we're going to start in verse 15. But before that, I'm going to read the verses before that, verses 1 through 14. Excuse me, 1 through 14? Wow, that's a lot of verses. Yeah, I'm going to do that one. So we got some of the background of what's happening here, and so it's going to be familiar with what we've already mentioned. It says, after these things, Jesus manifested or showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. Excuse me, the Sea of Galilee. And he showed himself in this way. So this is John's account of what happened in Galilee. Simon Peter and Thomas called Didymus, or the twin, and Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, who were James and John. Yeah, that's the sons of Zebedee. You know, how do like a title like that? Oh, it sounds really like a
Sons
superhero.
of Thunder.
I'm the sons of Zebedee.
Yeah.
And they were called the sons of thunder. There was something interesting about that, I'm sure. There's a backstory there I don't know. But and two others of the disciples were together. So that's where they got that number 7. They added all that up. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. They said to him, we will also come with you. And they went out and they got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. Now, that night, yes, they fished at night. They used nets. That was the time they knew they could catch their fish. They were smart people. They knew what to do, right? They knew how to do their task. They worked all night long, and they caught zilch, nada. I tell you what, if I had gone fishing and I caught nothing, I'd be a little irritated. So they caught nothing. But when the day was now breaking, Jesus was on the beach. Yet the disciples did not know it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, I can just see him saying, hey, guys. Only he says, children, what'd you catch? That's the vernacular. Do you have any fish, do you? And they answered him, no. I can imagine the no was no. And he said to them, cast the net on the right side. Because they've been fishing on the left side, apparently. Because that's their custom, I guess. I don't know why. Cast it on the right side, and you're going to find a catch. So they cast, and you can imagine himself saying, okay, fine, this guy, he thinks he knows this stuff. He says, well, just to humor him, well, one more time, you never know. So they cast, and they were not able to haul it in because of the great number of fish. Now, shouldn't something about this time in their minds be going, click,
Ding, ding, ding,
ding, ding, ding, ding?
Yeah.
Therefore, the disciple whom Jesus loved, and that's, by the way, code for John, he said to Peter, it is the Lord! You just see this excitement. I'd love to act this out. So when Simon Peter heard it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment where he was stripped for work, and he threw himself into the sea. He didn't just, dip in. He just jumped in as fast as he could. And you just see him going, making a new Olympic record, apparently. Because he was anxious, because this is the Lord, right? But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from land, about 100 yards or so, dragging a net full of fish. So when they got to the land, they saw a charcoal fire already laid, and fish placed on it, and bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have now caught. And Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land, full of large fish, 153. Although there were so many, the net was not torn. Wow, this is heavy with implications, by the way. And Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples ventured to ask him, who are you, knowing it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, gave it to them, and the fish likewise. This is now the third time that Jesus had manifested or showed himself to disciples after he had been raised from the dead. So that's our background. A lot of background. I'm sorry about that. But I like the background. The background's kind of important. So when John said, "It is the Lord," what did Peter do? Yeah. So did he, dog paddle in or, float his back in, or what do you think?
No, he probably swam as fast as he could to get there.
He was in a hurry. He wanted to get to the Lord. Think about that. That's a good object lesson for us. Should we be hurrying to the Lord's side on things in life?
Yeah.
Yes, we should. So this kind of sets the context for Peter now. And remember, Jesus had what setting out for them?
He was cooking.
A nice charcoal fire. A nice charcoal fire. Okay. This is kind of implications here too as well. We'll talk that in a moment. And so he gets up to them, and this is where our verses pick up in 15 and 7 through 17, our first section. And the first section is do you. So Peter's rushed to the Lord's side. And now apparently Peter and John have separated a little bit from the group, the implication is. They're not with the other five. Yeah, five. My math's not my strong suit. But they were a little bit off to the side, and because Jesus wanted to talk to Peter, and John was kind of hanging around, is what the implication was here, okay? So in these first 3 verses, I want you to listen for some key words or phrases that are related to Jesus' post-breakfast conversation with Peter. Who's got number 1 for me?
I have
Go ahead,
number
read those verses for us.
When they had eaten breakfast, Jesus asked Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he replied to him. You know that I love you. Feed my lambs, he told them. A second time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, he said to him. You know that I love you. Shepherd my sheep, he told them. He asked him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved that he asked him a third time. Do you love me? He said. Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Feed my sheep, Jesus said.
Wow. So there's some heavy verses here, isn't it? The implications of what this means, okay? Because here they are, they finished breakfast, they're satisfied, right? And I don't know about you, but when I'm hungry, I'm not going to be concentrating on things. But when I'm satisfied, now I can relax a little bit and I can absorb what's going around me. And this is kind of what's going on here, right? And so he takes Simon Peter aside, and like I said, the impression is also, by the way, John's nearby. And he asks him a question. What was the question? Do you love me? Now, and he added something, more than these, right? And then he asked him again a second time, do you love me? Right? He left off the more than these this time, right? And he asked him a third time, do you love me? Does this mean anything, you think, to Peter?
Repetition is good for the soul.
Repetition is always good for the soul. Yes. But remember what happened on the night of the crucifixion? He denied him not once, not twice, three times. And he denied him while he's warming himself at that charcoal fire outside the compound where Jesus is being tried.
Oh, yeah.
And here's Jesus with his charcoal fire feeding him, right? Kind of an interesting connections. You think any of this stuff came back to Peter? I think so. I think it was on purpose.
Yeah.
Jesus was doing this to get Peter's attention.
Well, not only that, but Peter had been swimming.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah, he didn't
He
cry
was
off.
holding,
Yeah.
He was warming himself at that
Warming
fire.
himself too. Exactly right. He was. You're right. Exactly. Good point there. And he asked these questions. Now, in the English language, we see the word love used. The New Testament was written primarily in Greek. The people spoke Aramaic for the most part, but Greek was that language that's universal. Everyone knew Greek. So you could write this letter, this gospel account, John did, and send it to somebody in another part of the known world, and guess what? They could read it. Isn't that amazing? And that was because of Alexander the Great. And Alexander the Great came through the known world and basically did what's called Hellenization, spreading the language and the culture of Greek. And that allowed people to talk to each other that had never been able to do this before. because he was able to do that. Then the Romans came after him, and they built these roads to everywhere in the known world. So now, not only could you understand what people were saying, but you could travel to where they were. Was this at the right time that Jesus came?
It seems like it.
It was the right time. It was the right time. That's why he came at that particular point in history, because that was the best time to reach the world. And this is, anyway, going on, that's one of these things I just love to talk about here. So he says, go back to the subject here, do you love me? Now, in the Greek language, there's more than one word that means love. You may or may not know this, but there's several words. In our handout, if you look at the handout number 1, the first page says love. And I'm just going to read that real briefly here. For you online, I'll read it for you. The first thing here is, okay, the New Testament Bible uses the Greek language, and we see 3 different Greek words to describe the various aspects of love. Agape, or agape, phileo, and storge. Storge. That's the best I'm going to get. I'm not Greek normally, so. There is another word for love that's sometimes used in other Greek literature, but nowhere in the Bible, and it's eros. But we're going to worry about these 3 because this is the 3 of the primary ones, is these 2 that are used in the New Testament. Agape is the deepest and highest form of love. It means doing good things for another person, regardless of how it may affect you. It's known as sacrificial love. Any examples of sacrificial love you can think of? Besides the obvious one, Jesus, right? Dying for us.
Well, God for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Anytime that someone gives when it hurts them, affects them,
Right.
but they do it anyway.
Okay.
Tithing can be part of that.
That's true.
You give up your coffee.
More than that, right?
Yes, more than that.
But we've heard stories before about people who don't even know the person, but they know they're going to get hit by that car, so they run out in front of the car, push them aside, and they get hit. You know, and you've heard of this before. That'd be a good example also of that sacrificial kind of love. The ultimate, of course, is God's love for us, sending His Son to die for us, right? Yeah. Phileo is a kind of brotherly affection towards someone we really like. I might say we really, really like. It's a deep, abiding friendship. Can you think of an example of phileo, perhaps, maybe in your experience, or maybe something you've read or anything like that?
Well, maybe your best friend that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody who you would feel confident if you spoke to them about something, they would not use it against you, right? They're your friend. You can count on them. Through thick and thin, you have a friend. I remember when I was younger, I had a next door neighbor who was my friend, and somebody else, some guy named Bill Daly. I don't know where Bill Daly is today, but I was like first grade or something like that. An example from the Bible that I thought about was David and Jonathan. David and Jonathan. Remember the friendship they had? It was deep. It was abiding. You know, David could confide in Jonathan. Jonathan could confide in David and not have to worry about that, right? So phileo. And storge affects to loving one's relatives. It's a relatively unknown term that is used only a couple of times in Scripture, and it's only in a compound construct, which I don't know what that means. Anyway, so 2 of these Greek words for love, agape, and phileo, were used in the well-known exchange between Peter and Jesus after Christ's resurrection we're talking about today. Their discussion is a fascinating study into the dynamics of their relationship at that time, and how Peter, still conscious of his denial of the Lord, tries to handle his guilt. Did Peter feel guilty, you think?
Oh, yeah.
It was probably consuming him. Probably consuming him. And so the Lord knows that. He knows our hearts. He speaks directly to Peter's concerns, and he says, Peter, do you love me? Can you imagine how that would have struck right to his core? You know? And he tells him to do something. He's given him a commission. He says, if you love me, then do such and such, right? He should, what was the first?
Feed my lambs.
Feed my lambs. And I forgot to mention, do you love me more than these? What does more than these mean, do you think?
Probably the other disciples.
It could be, yes, it could be the disciples, right?
Could be fish.
It could be fishing. Seriously, it could be. We don't know exactly. I tend to think it's because of the contrast he brings. and because of this is a direct reflection, by the way, when Peter was first encountered Jesus. Remember when that was?
He was fishing.
He was fishing, and he says, "Follow me." Remember that?
You fishers of men.
I will make you fishers of men. Right. And so Jesus called Peter, and he left his nets and followed him. Okay. But now he's back to his nets. So a lot of theologians think that might be one of the main reasons. But they also think it could be maybe the disciples, because remember there was a conversation going on. Who's the best of our group? You know, I am. No, I am. You know, it could be that Jesus was addressing that. Do you love me more than these kind of relationships?
So Peter said that if everyone else goes,
Exactly,
I
will.
will. So that's, I think that's a
And it could very well be that. We don't know for sure. But it could be any of those things that draw us away from Jesus. Okay? And that's what the key was here, right? Do you love me more than these things? Maybe he's pointing to the boat. Maybe he's pointing to the disciples. You know?
It seems like he must have waved his hand and said more than these.
Yes.
Whatever was present.
Whatever
that's
was.
That's what I'm getting.
Yes.
Because it's more than one. It could whatever was around them or he pointed to.
Right.
More than these.
Could be.
You know how we do that.
It was something that was taking priority
Yes.
over Jesus, apparently. Jesus wanted to make sure he understood. Jesus wanted Peter to understand that you should not take that as a priority. I should be your priority. And that's the relationship we see in these words, because it had to be one of those kind of things, right? So he tells him to do something specific. What does he tell him to do?
feed my lambs.
Okay. The first one was tend or feed my lambs. And the next time he said it, he said, shepherd my sheep. Now, shepherd is a little bit different than tending. Same idea, but the shepherd is relationship. You look towards the good shepherd, which was Jesus, right? The example of Jesus. And I think he's pointing him towards do what I showed you to do, you know, and take care of these lambs. Now, lambs is also an interesting word. He didn't say sheep necessarily in that one, right?
No.
In the first one, he said lambs. Second one, he said sheep. And the last one, he said sheep again. So the lambs part was relating to young Christians, I think. People who need instruction, that need help, right? Should that be our goal too as Christians? If we're mature Christians, should we be helping others as well? Yeah, we should be. And that's what he's commissioning Peter in this way. But he's doing it in a broad way because he knows Peter is going to be a leader in the church. Peter became a leader in the church. Peter became one of these people that would speak out, would be the first ones to say something, right? I think one of the first sermons recorded in Acts is by Peter, if I remember right. I might be wrong about that. I think it's Peter. Peter stood up to say the things. So Jesus is preparing him for what he has to do in his life. He says, these other things are going to fade away, Peter, but this is the main thing. I want you to be focusing on this, and I don't want you to falter. You know, because he's pointing to the fact that at a time when Peter did falter.
Yeah.
Remember? I don't know the Lord. No, I don't know him. I don't know him. Cock-a-doodle-doo. What did I say?
Wow.
You know, so this is something that Peter needs to hear this, because Peter had done that. He had betrayed the Lord, and now this is his opportunity to be restored. Has there been a time when maybe we did something that we realized, wow, I failed you?
Well, I think
And we wanted to be restored, right?
Yeah.
I think in that particular
Yeah.
instance that Peter was humbled.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Peter was a very proud
Before
man.
then, he wasn't a humble person.
Was Peter a proud man?
Yes.
Oh, very much so. Remember he famously say, all others will leave you, but I won't, and I got a sword. Remember that?
Well, he cut the ear off.
Yeah, that's right. Malchus.
Yes.
Out
Yes.
here.
And by the way, Peter was not any different than us. We would probably do similar things.
Until you realize you're failing,
Yeah.
you're confident.
What's
Like
it?
I've always said, I'm
Yeah.
always confident no matter how wrong I am.
I like that. I just gotta remember that one. And there's, by the way, don't leave out this other time too. In Acts, Peter was basically given an opportunity to witness to Cornelius, but God knew Peter still had some struggles in his life with going to a person like Cornelius. Because who was Cornelius?
Is that the centurion?
No, that was a different
No,
guy.
he was a
Gentile.
non-Jew.
He was a Gentile. Yeah. He was a Gentile. And yet he wanted to know more about Jesus. The Holy Spirit had been working on his heart, right? And so God knew that Peter had a problem with that. So Peter was in the evening, I think it says on the cool evening, on the roof of the thing, he had a vision. A sheet came down. A sheet came down, and on this sheet was all kinds of animals, clean and unclean. And the Lord said, Peter, kill and eat. Oh no, Lord, I can't do that, because he saw the unclean there. He couldn't do that. Happened again. I can't do it. Happened again. 3 times.
I agree with Peter.
And so what was Peter being told here? Accept Cornelius. You may think he's unclean, but I've cleaned him. Right? So Peter had Peter was somebody that God knew he had to deal with and make sure you understand the point. You know, if you've ever had to deal with children before, sometimes some children got to be repeated 1, 2, 3, maybe more times before they get the point. Peter was like that. And he's not any different than us. We need to be repeated too in our lives, don't we?
Well, Peter had a background. He was a Jew, and they were not to associate with
Exactly.
Gentiles. So
Exactly.
that was the
So that's why he had that problem, right? Yeah. And he could get over it apparently, and that's one of the reasons why. But anyway, I said I digressed a little bit there. But he was given these chances to redeem himself, if you want, and be restored. Think about that. The Lord restores us, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And he did. He was restored. And that's what Jesus was making sure that Peter knew. Peter, even though you failed in this one test, you're not a failure to me. You know, you're restored. Isn't that a nice thing to know that when we do fail the Lord, he's willing to take us back and restore us? You know,
Yeah, he could have gotten angry. He could have rebuked him and
Yes.
condemned him and
cast him out. Or
cast
something.
him out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't do that.
He didn't.
He loved Peter. Even when Peter failed him in that critical juncture, he understood why, and he restored him. Wow. I'm so glad that God's in the restoration business, you know. I don't know about you, but so Jesus' grace and restoration is so important because people are imperfect and will fail. We're all that way. I want to reiterate that. I'm imperfect. We're all imperfect. We're going to times we're going to fail. Jesus will restore us, right? Isn't that neat? No.
Yes.
Even when we fail, Jesus is ready and willing to forgive us and restore us to his purposes. Let's go to the next one. I take too much time on these things. It's such good stuff.
You need to start at 9.
I know, I need to. All right, so let's go to the next one, verses 18 through 19. 18 and 19. And who's got number... Oh, wait a minute. Did I forget
Number
one?
2.
I forgot number 2. Who's got number 2?
Me.
Go ahead, read that one. Thank you for reminding me of that.
I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and I am known of mine.
So when he is talking about feed my sheep, tend to my sheep, take care of my lambs, he knows what he's talking about, doesn't he? He is that good shepherd. And so this is to remind us that he knows the best for us. Remember, the shepherd, the good shepherd, was the one who would take care of him. He would lay down his life for his sheep. When they took him, the sheep at night in the sheepfold, the good shepherd would go to sleep maybe, but he'd go to sleep in the doorway. Nothing would pass him. He would be the first one that wolf would hit, not the sheep. You know, and that's the impression there. And his sheep love him in return, by the way. His sheep know his voice, the good shepherd's voice. A lot of times they'll take more than one group of sheep and put it in that sheepfold at night. You might have 3 or 4 different shepherds coming from different places at night to put them into that secure place at night. And then the next day, the shepherds go out and they call their sheep by name. And the sheep know the voice of that shepherd and they follow that shepherd. So that's the good shepherd he's talking about here in these verses. And that's an important thing to remember is Jesus is fulfilling that good shepherd role, isn't he? We should know his voice. That's the key there. Now I can go on. Thank you for reminding me of that. Let's look at the next 2 verses. And as you do, I want you to think about how God used Peter after this conversation that he had with him. Who's got number 3?
Okay.
Go ahead and read that one.
Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will gird you and bring you where you do not wish to go. Now this he said, signifying by what kind of death he would glorify God. And when he spoke this, he said to him, follow me.
Wow. So he's given him not only restoration, but he's also given him some information about what's going to happen to you, Peter. He says, this is not an easy road you're going on. This is to be my disciple, to be my representative to a world that is antagonistic towards the gospel. something's going to happen.
It's
Yeah.
gonna cost you.
It's going to be costly.
Yeah.
Discipleship is always costly in one way or another. And that's sometimes we forget that. We think, oh, it's an easy road. I'm a Christian now. Everything's wonderful. People are not going to like you being a Christian. I'm reminded when I was in Utah of this really sweet couple, Mormon couple, who came to know the Lord. And they're a part of our church. And their family disowned them totally. They wouldn't let them see their grandkids anymore. They lived in the same town, but you couldn't see them because they had left the faith of Mormonism and gone to be a Christian. And discipleship can be a costly thing to do. And so this is one example of that. There's lots of others we'd probably talk about. But he says that when you're younger, you were able to basically do what you wanted to do. You know, you could go where you wanted to go. You know, you were your own man. You know, you could go fishing, you could do whatever. It says, but when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will gird you and bring you to where you do not wish to go. So people have looked at these verses and they've thought what they could mean. There is one line of reasoning, well, when you're older, you sometimes can't even dress yourself. So maybe that could be part of it, you know. But there's a caveat here. Then verse 19 says, now this, Jesus said, signifying by what kind of death he would glorify God. So most people believe this is talking about the crucifixion process. In the crucifixion process, once you were convicted of whatever the crime was, you had this cross piece. And this cross piece, they would tie your arms to it, and you would carry it to the place of crucifixion. There's a certain name for that cross piece. I forgot what it is now.
It's the catabolum.
Oh, somebody's reading. Very good. That's exactly, and it's a Greek word.
I don't know if that's correct pronunciation.
No, you're just about exactly on as far as I know. Yeah, the patibulum. That sounds good. Yes, it talks about that, by the way, in page 123 of our study book, the third paragraph down on 123. Anyway, so it was likely Roman crucifixion. So this is referring to. They would you would get your arms tied to that and had to walk to your side of the crucifixion. Then sometimes they would just tie your arms on really, really securely, but more than likely they would drive this crude nail. They call it a nail, but it's more of a spike, and it's usually a squared type of piece of iron. And they would drive it into the cross piece, and they'd hoist the cross piece up on the top of this pole, and that's where you'd be then crucified. And they would also nail your feet to the cross as well. Anyway, so this outstretched arms was a symbol of that. People knew that because they've seen that. The Romans were very, very good about enforcing Roman law. And one way they did that is by taking those traitors and those bad people that went against Rome and crucifying them on the main road. It would be like putting them on I-5 or as I-5 comes into Vancouver or 205. You know, everybody would see it and say, "Oh wow, Rome is really tough and really powerful. We better obey Rome." It was their way of enforcing that. And so everybody was familiar with it. So when you use this kind of verbiage like he did, people knew probably what they were talking about right away. The person's outstretched arms in the act of crucifixion, which was a horrible way to die. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. So what would this cause, though? What would this cause?
What, the crucifixion or impalement?
In verse 19, him being crucified. What would be the result of that?
You glorify God.
God would be glorified because they're not going to crucify you for doing nothing. They're crucifying you for being that faithful follower of Christ, that example, that model that they have to do something to stop. You know, you're public about it. You shared the gospel. You went before governors, before magistrates, before the elders. You weren't shy about doing it. Peter wasn't shy about doing it. And this is the example. It says this will glorify God. Not the fact that you're being crucified, but what you were doing that led to your crucifixion. This is what he's talking about. And then he ends this with an interesting two-word exclamation. What does he say to him to do?
Follow me.
Follow me. Does that sound familiar again? I think I mentioned that before. Let me see, where are we in this? Matthew 4, 18 through 20. Who's got number 4?
I do.
Go ahead and read that for us.
Now as Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee,
he saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Immediately they left their nets and followed him.
So the words follow me, I think they're familiar again to Peter.
Mm-hmm.
All this stuff is flooding back to Peter. You're just imagining as Jesus is saying these things, and he said, I said I'd follow him. And what did I do? I denied him. I ran away. You know, and all this stuff is coming back to him. So he's reiterating, he says, it's okay, Peter.
I think it's deeper than that.
It's really,
Because Jesus said, I'm going where you can't follow.
right.
Now he's telling him to follow.
Yes, yes. And he will be following him. We know that from history. Peter was that leader. And we also know something happened to Peter. He was crucified. He was martyred. The first martyr was actually one of the sons of thunder, James. And James, we know that James was killed for his faith. But Peter was also killed. And now tradition, we don't know this. This is tradition. This is not in the Bible. Tradition was that Peter, the first century church says that Peter was crucified upside down. He didn't feel worthy to die the way his master had died. You know, that could be. That would be very Peter. If you think about it, that'd be very Peter. So he could have. I don't know. But he did. We do know that he did die through the terrible method of crucifixion. So remember that Peter's relationship, Jesus' relationship with Peter began with those words, right? Follow me. Jesus was again reminding Peter that he was going to be used by God. Wow. Well, do we want to be used by God as Christians? I sure do. You know, do I want to be crucified? I don't know. That's a really, that's a hard thing, isn't it? It's a hard thing. But Peter decided to do it, right? To follow him all the way. So we need to remember that while failures will happen, our lives should be marked by obedience and following Jesus' leadership in our lives. Sometimes in difficult conversations, we're tempted to change the subject, right? Maybe we don't like what people are saying, so hey, what about this over here? We're going to see Peter did a similar thing here. Let's look at the next verses. Excuse me. So we talked about do you, talked about will you, and what about question mark? What about question mark? Let's see. John 21 verses 20 through 23. In these last four verses, I want you to notice how Peter tries to change the subject. Who has number 5? Number 5? Steve?
Hi, Steve.
Oh, Steve got it.
5. Why? No, I don't have 5, but I'll read it.
Oh. What? Go ahead.
Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned back on his bosom at the supper and said, Lord, who is the one who betrays you? Peter said, and Jesus said to him, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Therefore this saying went out among the brethren, that the disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but only, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you?
Wow. So here's John writing the Gospel of John, okay? Relating this instance where he was like close by listening to what Jesus was telling Peter, okay? And Peter's, I don't know about you, but if I'm in a private conversation with another person and somebody else is kind of like nearby, I get kind of like, well, why is he? It's almost that kind of thing, okay? Because here's Peter. Now, do you think Peter was feeling a little uncomfortable with some of these discussion questions?
Oh, yeah.
I
I think so, yeah. So what do we do when we're uncomfortable sometimes? We try to change the subject maybe a little bit, or go to something a little bit better, right?
I noticed that he called John, what about this man?
Right.
He could have said his name, but it's
Yeah.
something, it's almost like he didn't like him or call him in something else than who he was, He was a person, like, what about John? Or, but he called him this man. I'm like, wow, that was cold.
Well, remember, we're trying to look at it in our lens. Okay, if I put on somebody else's glasses, am I going to see as good as I get with my own? No, because these lenses are made for me, right? So we're looking through our lens right now. Now, in actuality, that's not an uncommon way to speak back then. Because Jesus many times says, woman, what do I do to you? Now, that wasn't meaning disrespect, because he was talking to his mom. But that was the way they would use those words. So I wouldn't say necessarily don't cast too much aspersions on him.
Alright.
But you know, and again, remember who's recording this? John's recording this. So John maybe, you know, and this is years looking back at this event, right? And so he says, Lord, what about this person here? So we kind of do that sometimes, don't we? We kind of like, okay, fine, you've concentrated on me. I'm really embarrassed. Yes, I'm so sorry. What about John, though? What about John? What about him? And why is he so close right now listening to our private conversation? You know, it could be part of that, too.
Yeah.
But anyway, but he says that, right? And so Jesus, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. In other words, don't worry about him. He, you know, if I want him to live for a long time or a short time, you know, because he just got through talking about how he was going to be dying on the cross. You, Peter, you're going to die on the cross. So he wants to, well, what about John? You know, so it's almost that kind of thing. Now, I don't want to put too trite a thing on it, but we do feel uncomfortable in those situations. And I think part of this is Peter trying to deflect a little bit and bring another person in on it. You know, sometimes, I said I like to go fishing by myself. But sometimes I go fishing with somebody else. It's kind of hard because then you got to make conversation and stuff, you know. And so it's got to be somebody you really care to talk to and stuff like that. But sometimes you get uncomfortable, and so you wish there was a third person there. Say, well, you know, maybe I can, you know, pal up with this person and not have to worry about this person talking all the time. It gets uncomfortable. And all I'm saying is, Peter was probably uncomfortable here, and he's trying to change the subject around a little bit.
I hear my mother saying, you worry about you, don't worry
Yes.
about your sister.
Yes, parents are good about, they identify that. So I think Jesus identified that, because what did Jesus say? We're almost out of time here, but Jesus said, if I want anything to come, what is that to you? You follow me. So he's remembering, coming back. Again, he's saying, follow me, follow me. I think there's a theme here. Peter, follow Jesus. Right? Do we have to be told things over and over sometimes in our lives? Yeah. I mean, I can't remember how many times I had to tell my boys the same thing over and over and over, and hopefully they would get it. It's kind of that way here. You follow me. Therefore, okay, and he talks about the saying that went out that this disciple would not die. Now, of course, John's talking about himself here. So he's heard this rumor before. John, you're never going to die. I heard that Jesus said so. No. Jesus never said I wouldn't die. And we do know one thing for sure. He was the last person to die. He died while in exile on the Isle of Patmos, I believe. There is some tradition that he at the end of his life, he was beheaded. We don't know that for a fact, but there's some tradition that speaks of that. But we do know that Jesus had done something on the cross. Very interesting. When he saw his mother there, he said something to John. Behold your mother.
Take care.
And he said to his mother, behold your son.
And I don't understand that.
Jesus knew who would be the last disciple to pass on. He knew that if he gave that responsibility to John, that John would take care of his mom.
Yeah, but she had a son.
True. At the time, though, they weren't followers. As a matter of fact, they kind of didn't want to have him do it. They thought he was a little bit crazy in some cases, you know, because they tried to take him away a couple times. Remember that? But I think in that time of stress, Jesus wanted to make sure that his mother was taken care of, and he trusted John. John was like, you know, you have friends, you have good friends, but then there's this one buddy.
Yeah.
And I think John was that person to Jesus. John was the one that they referred to John as the disciple whom Jesus loved. And so there was part of that thing he was.
That was probably, I'd like to know in Greek which word they used.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I'll have to look that up and see. But yeah, I think it was probably the deep friendship.
Yeah, it would be the filio.
Filio, yeah. But that's a good question. Anyway, it says, so that rumor is basically not true is what John is saying. Translation here, that's not true. You know, that was just a rumor, right? But anyway, basically, well, what is that to you, Peter? Why are you concerned about just this man? Be concerned with your calling. Should we be concerned with our calling? Not by looking at somebody else and say, oh, wait a minute, what about them? We do that all the time. I do it all the time. It's a common human thing, right? So beware of that. We're out of time. I haven't heard the bell yet. Maybe I missed it when I was talking. Ding, ding, ding. So let's finish up. Would that be a good summary statement for our lives, a mission statement? Follow Jesus. I think it would be. Yeah, it's a good one, right? And that's what Jesus is saying, Peter. Follow me. Do what I said. And we see that Peter did. He wasn't perfect. We know that. But he strove to be that man of God in many ways after this whole thing here. So God had a personal plan for both Peter and John. Both were important for the kingdom, right? Excuse me. God also has a personal plan for each one of us. And we should focus on being obedient to him, not what other people are doing, but what we're doing, right? So we should fulfill our calling. The kingdom grows stronger, and other believers are encouraged when we do that. What's more, the world will see our love for Jesus and be drawn to him. Would you be drawn to somebody of that character? Would you find that person interesting? Yeah, the world does too. The world does too. The world will persecute too, but the world will also be drawn to as a lighthouse almost type of situation, right? It talks about that in the gospel accounts where we should not hide our light under a bushel basket, right? We should put it up on a lampstand so all can see. Anyway, so let's conclude. So what's our main idea again here? That believers are offered God's grace even when they fail. Isn't that nice to know that we serve a Savior, a God that cares about us, even in those times when we fail him? Wow. He wants to restore us back when that happens. That's a great thing. Peter learned that. We should learn that as well. So we got these three areas we talked about today. Christians should examine the depth of their love for Jesus. That's what Jesus demanded of Peter, to think about this. Do you love me more than these? Do you love me? Take care of my sheep. Do you love me? Tend my lambs. All these different things, right? Do these things you know you should be doing. Second point is Christians can faithfully follow Jesus in spite of their past. Even though he denied him, was Peter still useful?
Yes.
Think about that. He denied him 3 times with an oath. While Jesus was undergoing the process of being tried and then executed, and he denied he knew him. The same person said, I'll take a sword and defend you to the life, right? Yet this person was restored. Jesus took a special effort to take him aside and say, I know what you're going through. Listen, I'll restore you right now. Wow. The last point, Christians are to trust God's plan for their lives. And that's what Jesus explained what was going to happen to Peter. And he said, don't worry about this other person, John. You worry about yourself. This is what the plans are for you that I have. Trust me, right? Trust me. So failure does not have to define our walk with Jesus, does it? There's been failures in our lives, each one of us probably. Our challenge is to turn to Jesus when we fail and to ask him to help us stay focused on his call. We need to be tendered in our heart. We realize when we do that, right away, we seek that restoration, right? And not let it build into something worse. So our challenge is to turn to Jesus when we fail and to ask him to help us to stay focused on his call. I want to stop with that part there. Anyway, let's have a word of prayer. We'll be dismissed. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your forgiveness, Lord, for how you care for us even when we fail you, Lord, even in a way that's it's so overcoming for Peter to realize he did that to his Lord, and yet Jesus forgave him, Lord. Thank you so much for how you love us and how you care for us. And Lord, for that sacrificial love, Lord, I just pray that you'd help us to be able to share with others as we follow the plan you have for our lives. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen.
And I was going to have us sing the song, and I ran out of time, but while you were getting ready to leave, I'll talk about it really quick if I can find my reference to it. Oh, well. Where is it? I'll have to find it now.
Later. I love you.
I love you too. Talk to you later.
Bye, guys.
Oh,
Bye.
there it is.
Nice seeing you again, too.
Bottom of the handout,
Yeah.
it says, I love you, Lord. And this is an interesting, oh, here it is. This person who wrote this is Lori Klein in 1974. She wrote the song when she was a young mother and the wife of a full-time college student, and they were living on only $400 a month, and they were struggling to make spiritual connections as well. And so she wrote this song, and it goes, I love you with the love of the Lord. It says, I love you with the love of the Lord, right? And I love you, Lord, and I lift up my voice to worship you. Oh, my soul, rejoice. Take joy, my King, in what you hear. May it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. Real simple chorus. but it spoke volumes to Lori during this time. And it does to us as well. We should love the Lord, right? Love the Lord. That's all I got. Mouth empty.
All right.
Thank you for being here.
That was
I
very
hope,
good. Thanks,
I hope
Norm.
you liked these verses today. I did. I
So
found
are
them.
we starting at 9 next time?
Oh, don't forget. Books. Did you guys get a book?
I
Yeah.
did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else need a book that didn't get one yet? No, here we go.
But
And the old books, if you don't want them anymore, bring them to me. I will collect them because I think there is a church that we give them to, so they can reuse.
Off to the Philippines.
Well, it may or may not be the Philippines anymore. There was a church in the gorge that needed help too. I know that. Oh, okay.
Here's an extra.
But if you're going to throw it away, don't throw it away. Give it to me.
I don't know if I want to share.
Well, you can also keep it. You can no, seriously.
I'm keeping mine.
I can also keep it. I don't want to say you can't keep it because it's a great resource.
It is.
Yeah.
And all the notes that go along with
Yeah,
it, so.
and everybody got theirs.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Good to see everybody.
See you guys later.
Oh, you got my jacket.
Wow, we beat the bell. That's because somebody's late with the
Holy
bell.
smokes, we did.
Because somebody's late with the bell. That's okay. Ah.
I remember when I wanted to tell Polly. You can go online to
Hurry,
order
you'll catch
those.
it probably. What's
Yeah.
that?
You can go online to order those national park passes too.
Oh, that makes sense.
I gotta crawl underneath my pickup truck tomorrow and pull off the purge valve solenoid.
The what valve?
Purge valve.
Purge
It
valve.
sits right on top of the gas tank and just vents the gas.
Oh,
tank.
it's part of the yeah.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
emission control thing.
Familiar
And
with
it sits, yeah, I'm gonna have to drop my spare tire, but you can get to it real easy, so,
Uh-huh.
or semi-easy. It's not like you gotta drop the gas tank to get to it, no.
Right. Have you gone online to see how somebody else has done it already? I guess.
No, I can look at it, pure unadulterated simplicity.
Oh, okay.
I got a bracket holding another part that I just gotta move out of the way,
Uh huh.
and then, a couple of the bolts are gonna be hard to get to. But I've got extensions and universals that'll get me around the corners.
Oh, they're very useful. Yeah, get the right one for the right angle. Yeah, I've run across those before. Sometimes you gotta go buy a special tool to reach a certain thing. Some cars they screwed up and you had to do things like loosen the motor mount and jack the engine a little bit.
Bryce is changing a fan belt, and Bryce's car was like that.
Uh-huh.